horror fans, happy October once again. Bored now, back with you and back with Rachel McDonald as always. And this is sort of a special October bonus, really, because Rachel informed me earlier, as before we started recording, and she has now caught up with the recent Candyman movie. Now, I, of course, previously did a spoiler-free review, which you can find. It's actually not on its own video, but you can find it on the Halloween 4 and 5 reviews. At the start of that video, I talk about, but I mean, now we're doing it anyway. You sort of maybe don't need to bother. But I gave my impressions at the time, and I guess I'll reiterate them a little bit here. But Rachel obviously was desperate to see this, so she finally got round to doing it, which is good. And now we can have a bit more of an in-depth discussion about it. So, first of all, if you want to set it up, and then we can start talking about it. Candyman.
I don't know why people were saying it was a spiritual sequel, because this is not a spiritual sequel. This is a direct sequel to the original movie. So if you're going to watch this movie, I would highly recommend watching the first movie as a refresher before you watch this one, because there are a lot of callbacks and a lot of tie-ins. So this one is set in modern day Chicago. Cabrini Green is once again a big setting for this, because as it was in the original movie, it was the settlement that there's a lot of themes of gentrification, white people moving into ghetto neighborhoods and driving all the people out, gentrifying them and turning them into profitable housing for a more upper class white people, which again was a theme in the first movie. This one follows starving artist. Well, we're going to call him a starving artist. He lives off his girlfriend, who is one of the best characters I've come across in a recent horror film. We're going to talk about her. Okay. He lives with his girlfriend. He's hit a bit of a creative wall. He's looking around for, new inspiration, and he happens to stumble across the Candyman legend, which in this one has actually become something more. Again, we're going to get into that. He stumbles across the Candyman legend, and he starts to become very drawn to this idea of Candyman. His new art exhibit is about that. And then, of course, his art exhibit encourages you to summon him, which might be the dumbest thing ever. Why do people keep summoning this dude? Just don't do it. But of course, his exhibit is called Say My Name, and it is all about summoning Candyman. So of course, people start doing it and people start dying. And as this happens, Anthony starts to get visions. He starts to go into fugue states. He starts to draw paintings he doesn't quite understand. And it's all about what exactly is happening. And when we get into spoilers, there are big reveals, which I think anyone going into the movie already knew this, but in the movie, it's treated as a big reveal of exactly who Anthony is and exactly how he is linked to Candyman. And it's a great link. It's a great bridge. So right off the bat, guys, as Keith said, this one's going to be a spoiler review, because we're going to have to discuss the original movie and this movie to fully get the extent. So before we get into anything in depth, I'll give my thoughts on the movie, because Keith has previously given his, but we can do a little rehash if you want to give some more thoughts this time around. But I've been looking forward to this movie for, I think, 2 years now. So ever since it was first announced that they were going to do a Candyman sequel, that Tony Todd was going to be returning, which he does, and we'll talk about his little appearance, and that it was going to be a sequel to the original, I was so excited. That's right. I think I first heard that they were doing a new Candyman, and I was just kind of like, yeah, okay. And then I heard that Tony Todd was coming back, and I was like, yes, because, I mean, he's brilliant. But so I've been looking forward to this for so long. And then, of course, it was pushed. The release was pushed. It was pushed again, and then it was pushed a third time. So finally getting to see it is a big deal for me. I really enjoyed this film. I think Nia DaCosta is a great director. I think right from the beginning, you can see her distinct style. I think she has a great eye for cinematography. I think the visuals in this film are beautiful. I think the sets are beautiful. I think the coloring really adds to the atmosphere. I think she does a great job with building tension. I think there are some great scenes where she knows how to film slasher violence without making it feel too overt. We have some great kill scenes that don't feel too in your face. And it reminds me a lot of the first movie in that it feels almost like a drama that's kind of masquerading as a horror film. Like it's more of a drama story. It's more of a kind of gothic horror than it's an actual flat out slasher film. The original Candyman often gets put in slasher categories, which I find very odd because it has never been a slasher film to me. It's always been more of a gothic horror with a little bit of, maybe a little bit of slasher elements. But this film, I thought the direction was great. I thought the acting was really good. I thought they cast it really well. I thought the characters were really fun. Anthony is a very interesting character. His girlfriend is one of the best characters I've come across in recent horror films. She is badass and she's smart and she's you know, and she knows exactly what she wants. She knows exactly what she's doing. They give her a little bit of a backstory that they don't quite go into. I wish they had expanded on her backstory a little bit because I feel like there was a little bit of meat there to understand why she stays with Anthony, because you find out that he's essentially living off her wage while he tries to make it as an artist, and you wonder a little bit why she might put up with that, and then you find out that her father was an artist who committed suicide in front of her, and they don't really delve into that too much, but they have this rich build up of her, and then we see her brother and his partner and how they're very supportive, so they build up this great little like group of characters to interact with. And I think that they do a great job of continuing the first film while still making this film their own film. So it does feel like it's tied to the first film. Nothing in this film contradicts the first film. It's all can be tied together, but it definitely has its own distinct style. I do think the climax got a little bit messy, and we can get into this discussion, but I did find myself getting to the climax of the film and getting a little bit confused as to what exactly was going on, and having to, like, Stephen and I were watching it and we were both like, we might have to rewatch this end scene, or the climax rather, because then we got the end scene, and we're going to get into this, but the end scene was brilliant and I loved it, and I thought it really made up for the fact that the climax was a little bit messy, the fact that the end scene was so strong. So overall I thought that this film was really great. It definitely did not disappoint, and I think it was worth the wait, and that it will hold up next to the original, and that it definitely has its own brand, its own identity. So do you want to just quickly give what your thoughts were, just as a refresher, just remembering how you felt about it?
I mean, I think I agree that it didn't disappoint. I think because I think it's always very hard when it's sort of like it's following on such a classic horror movie, and your expectations are reasonably high. Partly, I think, because people would know that Jordan Peele's involved. He's obviously producer, and that's obviously part of this whole racial context, because of course with Jordan Peele involved it makes perfect sense, and especially after the last year and a half we've had with stuff going on in the world, it made total sense, and then it was going to be as racially themed as it is, and it's a good way to update it. I think these feels like really modern characters and modern anxieties, and of course it always had that stuff in the background anyway with the first film, and that obviously be an interesting discussion for a future video about the way it deals with it in the first film. But no, the characters I thought were really well written, and the relationship with the girlfriend was very interesting. And some of the sort of contradictions between them, but it was good. Then you had a bit of comic relief with the friends as well. They were entertaining, I thought. So you in this sort of film, when it is going to be quite heavy and intense, you do need that comic relief. But get a good film if you get a film that does justice to the Candyman legend and the past film. It's maybe a bit harsh to expect it to be another masterpiece, because it's very rare you get masterpieces in general. So I think generally it's job done. I think they did what they needed to do. I think it's the perfect balance in a way of it being a good tribute to the first film, but then also carrying on its sort of story and making it a modern story. And that's a couple of points I probably disagree with you on.
Okay.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, the first point, not necessarily disagree, but I don't think the film is particularly scary. I mean, in the end, I don't think that's a problem. I think because the style is so distinct and the way it's directed, I think when you get to some of the kill scenes, I don't know if I would go so far to say they felt generic, but I guess for whatever reason they just didn't scare me. And you can't always put your finger on that. I mean,
No,
it's
fair
just this
enough.
thing
Yeah,
about horror. It takes a certain touch, and
that's true.
I would say I probably found them disturbing enough, but then maybe for whatever reason they didn't disturb me or scare me. But no, she's a good director. A good director. I agree with you about the style. It felt distinct. And the use of music again was very good because obviously that's something from the original. I mean, really, that score by Philip Glass
Beautiful.
is amazing, isn't it? And so I
Yeah.
think this continues in the tradition of that having a really eerie, effective sort of score. And so I didn't find it particularly scary, but I think it's a credit to the film that's not really an issue. I was so into what they did with the characters and with the story and the overall direction. You know, like I really like the direction of that scene in the art gallery where you have like one of the big deaths.
Yes.
I thought that was really well done late at night and just the whole
Yeah.
style of it and the use of color. So that was a really good scene. I do disagree with you on the development they have and the tie-in. Well, we can talk about it in a minute, but I actually didn't like that. I think
Okay.
it felt like a bit of a misstep. It felt like something where they were just tying it to the original film too much. It just felt like one of these convenient, because it was in the back of my mind where when it was leading up to it, and not that I guessed what it was going to be, but I sort of thought, well, yeah, they do keep hinting at this. Is there going to be some direct sort of tie-in? And yeah, I just didn't like it. It just felt like something which they didn't need to do in a way for me. So
Okay.
in a way, that's maybe my one complaint, because the other thing isn't so much of a complaint because I was into the style of the film and everything else. So
All right. So we're getting to spoilers here, guys. I just want to clarify. So the part that you're saying, the time that you don't like, is that the revelation that Anthony is the baby from the original movie?
yeah, I
Okay.
didn't
Okay.
like that.
Oh, okay. See, I loved that. I thought it tied the two movies together like really well, and because obviously we don't get Tony Todd in this until right at the end,
Mm,
and we don't have obviously Virginia Madsen either because Helen dies at the end of the first film, so we don't
yeah.
have a lot of characters to kind of move between the two films anymore. So I was wondering what the link was going to be. So I thought the fact that they decided to make Anthony the grown-up baby, I actually thought that that was a cool link. And I think that it worked with him being able to awaken Candyman and channel Candyman, because obviously in the first movie, Candyman did take the baby for a reason. So I liked the ageless Vanessa Williams popping up, because let's face it, she looks exactly the
Yeah,
same
that's
as she did in
very
the first
true. Yeah,
movie.
she does. That's
She's
amazing.
part
Yeah.
of that vampire club that Keanu Reeves is part of, where people just don't age. So when she pops up and talks about how yes, he is actually the baby, and she has that line, you know, he wanted you to be another one of his terrible stories. I thought that that was actually really effective, and I don't know. For me, the link worked. I can understand why it maybe might not work for some people. It could kind of be seen as a bit of a cliche, a bit of a hokey thing, but I thought that it was a good
Mm,
setup. And I think that the end of the first movie left that option open to have this kid grow up and somehow become obsessed with Candyman because of what happened to him. I mean, obviously, when you're that young, the experiences you have don't really impress upon you because you're an infant. But I don't know. I for me, the link worked. I thought it was a nice tie-in between the two films. But you know, it's like you said, sometimes you can't put your finger on why things do and don't work for you. So we might just have to agree to disagree on this area. And I mean, it's a good thing that it didn't ruin the film for you, because I mean, that would have been like a real downer if it had been a big enough contention that it had ruined the film.
yeah.
So at least if you don't like it, but you can still enjoy the rest of the film, because there is so much going on in this film that is like enjoyable. Well, did you like? Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about what they do with the mythos in this film and what Candyman has actually become in this film.
Yeah.
So I do find it very interesting because in the first film, Helen is investigating Candyman as part of a thesis that she's writing on urban legends and how urban legends spread and how they grow. And even the Candyman in the original film, she gets several different stories as to who and what Candyman is, where the origins came from, and she just happens to summon Daniel, the original Candyman. So in this movie, I found it very interesting that Helen herself has become an urban legend. They have a great scene where Brianna and Anthony have Brianna's brother and his boyfriend over, and the brother is like, "Hey, you want to hear a spooky story?" And you think that he's going to tell them about Candyman, but instead he tells them about Helen, and you find out how Helen's story has actually become a twisted urban legend, how she's become known to be responsible for several murders, and how the legend has become that she tried to kidnap the baby and that she tried to kill the baby and that she ran into the fire, as opposed to the real story, which is that she rescued the baby from the fire. So I thought that was a very cool tie-in to the first one about how urban legends grow and spread and change and evolve. And I thought that was a nice tie-in to the first movie, that Helen herself has now become kind of a Candyman legend. I feel like they could have maybe done a little bit more with that, given that at the end of the first movie, we actually do see Helen, appear as the Candyman with a hook after her husband chants the name in the mirror. But I guess that's not kind of what they were going for with this movie. They didn't want that villain. So I liked that angle. And then I liked how Candyman now has just become a legend that can be attributed to a lot of black men who experience brutality at the hands of white men. And again, this is getting into the racial side of things and how they talk about the original Candyman, and this story was in the original movie, obviously, was a black man who was raised to be a gentleman. He was not a slave, and he fell in love with a white woman, and because of that, and got her pregnant, and because of that, he was lynched and mobbed and his hand was cut off and he was killed. But I like how Candyman has now become stories of black men who have been brutalized by the police and have died and have now become the living legend of Candyman. I thought that was a very interesting tie-in, and it's almost like Candyman himself, like Tony Todd's Candyman, is like the queen bee of like a hive of Candymen. It's kind of an interesting concept. Did that part work for you, or did you not like that part either?
Yeah, no, that was good. That was really good. Because the ending of the original movie is probably one of my favorite endings to a horror movie.
It's a great ending, isn't it?
The twist of it is so tragic but kind of heroic at the same time. And then just the very end scene with her and her husband is really great.
It's great.
Really shocking. And I think it just goes further with the whole racial thing and reversing things. And this just, again, you're talking about the mythology, and it further goes into that, the fact that, it's almost like putting a white person in the skin of a black person in a way, in this, quite literally in some senses. But no, that was good. I thought that was, because in a way you do get a lot of scenes of people in horror movies telling horror stories. So the fact that they twisted that around and it wasn't the one you were expecting, I think that was a good way to subvert your expectations. And I think that's what this movie does a lot of the times. It just feels like a nice little twist on a classic horror story, and it advances on it. And to me, that's everything a sequel should do of a classic. So reasons they didn't go further with it is because it might have been hard to have done that without getting Virginia Madison back, and maybe they couldn't, for whatever reason, get her back. So I guess that might be one reason. But no, it was a nice twist. I agree with you on that one.
But the whole multiple Candymans and stuff, so that leads us into our kind of confusing climax. So earlier on in the film, when Anthony is researching Candyman and has gone back to Cabrini Green, he meets an older gentleman, Burke. his name is, who has been in the Cabrini Green area for ages, and Burke is kind of his, his exposition man. He comes in to tell us about the new legend of Candyman. He recounts an incident in his own childhood where he accidentally had, called, he had an encounter with a homeless man who was being sought after for putting razor blades in kids' candy, and the police came and actually beat the man to death, and you get the feeling that Burke has kind of been feeling guilty about that ever since. And so we have this character Burke who's kind of pops up now and then, tells us about Candyman, et cetera, et cetera. And then at the climax of the film, you find out that he's actually kind of orchestrated all of this. Like, he's been waiting for like all these years for the baby to come back to Cabrini Green so that he can manipulate him into summoning Candyman and becoming the new Candyman. And I think his motivation is that he wants Candyman to like become like almost like a vigilante, like a angel of justice for the Black community. Like, at least that was the impression I was getting. Like I said, the climax was very confusing. So what was your takeaway?
It might be, yeah, I mean, it could be a sign that it was a bit convoluted. I'm far, and they were trying a bit too hard, because not only in what it was trying to do, but in the scene itself, it was quite a frantic scene, and it just felt a little bit than it was something which they should have cut from the movie and just got
or at least explained
messy.
A bit better.
Yeah,
because Anthony at one point in the film gets bitten by a bee on his hand, and it gets infected, and then you slowly see the infection spread up his hand, up his arm. It goes to his face, and in the climax of the scene, half of his face is covered, and he almost seems to be in a trance. So it's almost like they're implying that he's being taken over by Candyman, but they don't quite explain how or why. Yeah, like I said, it gets a little bit messy. And I might have to rewatch it, but I didn't quite understand what they were going for in that climax. Like, it just felt a bit weird and a bit rushed. Like, maybe we could have used an extra 10-15 minutes to kind of build towards it a bit more. Had a bit more of a clearer explanation. It's just a bit odd, because like at one point Burke cuts his arm off. He cuts Anthony's arm off, and Anthony doesn't seem to react to it that much. So again, it's like he seems to be in some sort of trance, but they don't quite explain where the trance is coming from or why he's in that trance. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I was just not getting it, but there's obviously, like you said, I think there has to be a decision one way or the other. It's sort of one of those scenes, isn't it, and the development, that if you lost it from the movie, it wouldn't make really that much difference. So you could say maybe just cut it, but at the same time, I think you might be right. Then maybe it could have worked if they'd given it a bit extra time. But you have to do one or the other. Yeah, that's the thing. But I have to say, I did like if we gloss over the climax, the ending was good. So they have the cops burst in, and obviously they gun down Anthony because, well, cops in America, Black man, nice little bit of commentary going on there. Not that it's an American thing either. It's not confined there, but we're going to concentrate on America for now. It's a whole other discussion to get into. But they come down, they gun down Anthony, and then they arrest Brianna, the girlfriend, and she's sitting in the back of the car. And I actually really like this little twist, this little reveal. And she's saying to the cop, "Can you focus that mirror on me? Let me see myself. I will tell you, I will go with whatever story you want," because of course the cops are like, "Here's what happened. My partner came in and saw that he was in danger and clearly had to shoot the unarmed Black man lying on the floor in order to save himself because," and she's like, "Just let me see myself." And then of course he turns the mirror to her and she says, "Candyman," and she summons Anthony as the new Candyman to come out and kill the cops. And we get this great scene of him killing all the cops, and then we have the one part that was worth, like, if the movie was bad, it would have been worth watching the whole movie just to get to this. The cop says, "Who are you?" And that booming voice comes out of nowhere, that iconic Tony Todd voice. "I am the writing on the wall. I am the blood." in the it was just so good. And you get that beautiful voiceover as we see the reflections of all the different Candymen walking past, and then of course you get that brilliant final shot of Tony Todd emerging from the swarm of bees and the line, "Tell my story," as if to say, carry on the Candyman legend. I will always be here. There will always be some incarnation of me. I am forever. It was brilliant. It was so good. And I know that a lot of people complained that that was the only shot of Tony Todd that we got. I've seen a lot of people say they wish we could have gotten more. And while I understand that sentiment, because Tony Todd, I'm always up for seeing more of Tony Todd, like, yeah, I thought that for what this movie was and for what it was doing, if they'd had him in it more, it would have lessened that impact of seeing him at the end. I think we needed that reveal. Like when the voice came on, I actually like jumped, like Stephen felt me like jump and like tense up because I was so excited to hear it. And then that final shot of him, I thought was so effective and worked so well for the movie. So I'm kind of on the fence. So I'm kind of like, on the one hand, more Tony Todd, always a good thing.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I think that the fact that they didn't use him for the movie made that much more of an impact. What about you? Did you want more Tony Todd, or did you think it worked for what they were doing?
I mean, yeah, no, I'm with you because I think it obviously depends on the movie, and you do have to be careful because as great as it is to have more Tony Todd, it is like passing on the torch. So I don't think you want him in too much of the movie because it sort of overshadows the new Candyman and everything else. So I think, and it just works as such a great end scene. I don't think they could have ended the movie any better. So I think I think a lot of times with a movie, because there's maybe one or two scenes that we sort of both feel don't quite work, or we certainly agree on the scene leading up to this. So it's actually great that they managed to end it on such a good note, and a great use of Tony Todd. I think he's one of those actors who can sort of just have a small scene but still make it count. I mean, that's a sign of a really great actor. And I agree. I think the scene works perfectly, and I like the girlfriend's part in the scene because you sort of know it's going to come, but it works perfectly because obviously the cop is just being the cop, and he doesn't believe in the legend, and he's just being a racist sort of prick. And but I sort of like the way she outsmarts him in that sense. She like plays on it. She plays on the fact that, well, if I'm like this with him and just pretend that I'm pandering to him, that's actually a way to get him to do what I want to do. So it shows her as being like really smart, and it's a satisfying payoff for us watching the movie. And again, with the stuff with Todd, I think works really well. So it's a great way to end the movie. I agree with you. I don't have a problem with it only being. Yeah, you could always say maybe one or two other scenes, but I think generally it was a good way to use him, and it probably made sense, and it was just one scene at the end.
I actually made a gift set on Tumblr of Tony Todd, and like people reblogging it, all the comments are like, yeah, I'll be his victim. Like so many people. Like my husband's a little concerned that I might have a little bit of a crush on Candyman, but I mean, it's the voice, man. Most horror movie villains, everyone just wants to run away from, but like everyone wants Candyman because, very attractive, man. Have you seen any of the other sequels, like the two ones that came out in the 90s that were like really bad?
No,
you didn't see them. I saw them.
No.
Okay, so
we'll get to those. I mean, I've heard some people defend number two. I think they sort of say it's got its problems, but it does. Then it has interesting ideas in it, sort of thing. That's what I've heard as a way to expand on the first one.
Or maybe at some point we'll revisit the original and we'll do the sequels, because I was not a fan of the sequels that came out. But this one I thought was great. If we're going to rate this one, I'd probably go with probably 8 out of 10. It loses a couple of points for the fact that climax gets so confusing. Like I think they really did need to sort that out a little bit better. And I feel like if it had had a stronger climax, I could have given it like maybe a 9 or even maybe a 10, but it was so confusing and so convoluted that I just it took me out of the movie. Like all the way up until then, I was really enjoying the film and really loving all the developments. And then that happened and I just got really confused and it took me out of the viewing experience. So I'd probably go 8 out of 10 for this one. I thought it was a really solid sequel and I thought the direction was great. I thought the casting was good. I thought the characters were good. It just gets let down, I think, by that weird climax that I don't think was particularly well thought through. What about you? What would your rating be for this one?
Yeah, my rating's the same. My rating's 8. That's about right for me. Yeah, I think it's one of these things. I mean, with that complaint we both have, it had one too many ideas, and they just tried to make it a bit too complex, and it could have been a decision where they just said, yeah, that's got to go, or maybe expand on it, like you said. But yeah, it's one of those. But generally very positive, like you.
Yes,
so
definitely worth the wait. If anyone is interested, I am probably going to do a video, like a short video analysis on this. I haven't talked about it much here because I want to save it for my video, but I want to touch on how one thing I did feel about this movie. The first movie was told from a white person's perspective, and it was, I'm pretty sure, done by a white director. And so even though it had themes of racial inequality and gentrification and all of that, it still was told through a white person's perspective. Whereas I feel like this film is reclaiming Candyman for the Black community. You know, it's done by a Black director, it's got Black writers, a Black cast, and I feel like it was very important for them to take this horror movie icon who is part of their community and kind of reclaim it for their community. So I am hoping to, it depends on how busy I get, because work is crazy at the moment, but I am hoping to do a little analysis about that angle on my channel. So if you guys want to swing by in the next couple of weeks, I should hopefully have that up, and it will fit the whole Halloween theme that's going on. So I want to delve a little bit more into that. If anyone's interested, swing by my channel and check that out in the next couple of weeks. I should hopefully have that up.
That sounds really good, really interesting, because I think that's definitely a critique of the first film that people have about obviously the fact it's a white character, and it's this idea of almost the white savior, and it's coming from a white perspective. And I think, as I hinted, I think it's for that original film. I think it's an interesting idea anyway, but I can understand the complaint of it, but I think it's just a even more reason to update it and just do it differently now. And I think it's one of the things moving forward, if we are going to make progress with, obviously Black stories in cinema, I think more and more we need to have films like this. We need to have films where it's obviously a Black person's touch throughout. That's something I picked up on, the fact that pretty much everybody in major departments in the film is of colour. So it's very important. I mean, there's a documentary, you might have seen it on Shudder, the one about Black horror cinema.
I haven't watched that. No, I'll have to check that out.
Horror noir, yeah, it's on Shudder.
Yes. I know the one you're talking about.
And that's something that they talk about in this idea of reclaiming their stories, or just having like a Black influence on horror. Horror movies has this sort of reputation of at least giving them roles. I think it was one of the first genre to at least do that, but the documentary does go into, obviously, some of the depictions over the years and how some of the depictions aren't very good and they do fall back on old stereotypes. But it's definitely something they're talking about in that, about how moving forward, more and more we do need the Black influence to grow in horror cinema, and where you have... Because obviously there's this thing about token Black people in certain horror movies, but just obviously it doesn't have to be every movie, but just having this thing of having movies in horror and obviously other genres where you just have a black crew completely sort of thing. So they can actually get to tell their stories from their point
It's definitely
of view.
important. And I think, we definitely need more movies like this with, the black community kind of reclaiming them. Because Candyman, especially, is such an iconic horror movie villain, and he is one of the only, if not the only, horror movie villain of color. And his story is so rooted in racism, his backstory. And like I said, the first movie is able to touch on this, but only through the lens of a white person. So the fact that they had a black director, black writers, people working on this who were in that community to help reclaim it. And we definitely need more of that moving forward in the horror genre and just media in general. We need more voices of color. Obviously, I'm not black, but I am a person of color, so I do understand, the need to have those stories be integrated more. I mean, this is a whole discussion for another time, but it's definitely something that media needs to incorporate more voices of color, more people of color working behind the camera and in front of the camera and giving them more voices. And I think this movie is definitely an important step in that. So we're moving along. We're not moving as quickly as we should, but we are at least progressing. So that's something. And this movie definitely helps with that. So everyone go and see it. It's a great movie. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Everyone should see it, really, especially if you're a fan of the original and you have an interest in this sort of stuff. So, yeah, definitely go and see it. It's a good modern Candyman film. So, we would both recommend seeing it. So, if you have seen it, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Once again, please like and subscribe. We will be back over the course of the month with more horror reviews, also horror TV, top 10s, various lists. So let us know your thoughts on the new Candyman. And we'll subscribe to Rachel's channel if you haven't, put the link in the description. And we'll be back with more soon. So see you guys later. Goodbye.
See ya.